So, for our first keynote, I want to welcome Michael Taylor. Michael is the global supply chain leader for Aerospace, Northrop Aerospace Systems, F-35, and he's responsible for all global supply chain activities in support of the F-35. Okay. You can flip your own slides if you want, or we can flip them for you.
Appreciate the chance to be here and talk to you today, talk to you about an important program, the F-35 program. I'm sure you've all heard a little bit about it, read about it in the press. It certainly does get a lot of press. And tell you a little bit about Northrop Grumman overall as well. So I think we'll start with a video. We have a video to kick it off with.
Freedom around the world in support of the global war on terrorism.
I knew there was people out there like you who were supporting us, that the country's behind you no matter what the politics are, and that you're doing the right thing.
So pretty cool video, I think. A lot of neat products. Northrop Grumman has a lot of very exciting products, and I'm here to talk to you about one of them, F-35. Quick question, though, before I get started. How many are suppliers in one way or another to Northrop Grumman? Many of you? Great. Very good. I have two things to talk about. One is about the program, then a little bit about our view of suppliers and what we need from the supply base. So I'm responsible for the suppliers for the F-35 program, which is quite a broad responsibility, as the supply base is pretty broad. So I know pretty well what we need from our suppliers on this program. I'm fortunate to have been able to work on the F-18 program for a while, a really exciting plane, awesome aircraft. And now just recently I've moved over and I'm working on the F-35 program. And so, you know, the F-35 program is like no other program. It is the largest defense program out there today. It gets a lot of press, both good and bad, and Usually what sells papers is bad press, so it does get a lot of bad press these days. But it's a tough program. It's in the first stages, or it's in the stages of development. And any program in the stages of development has problems and challenges. And you a lot of times hear a lot of the naysayers come out and talk about those challenges. In Washington, they say there's 3 phases of a major program like this. The first phase is when the naysayers say it doesn't work. Bad program, it won't work. Then you move beyond that and the program, and then that kind of shifts a little bit, and people say, well, it's too expensive. And so then it moves on after that, and they have some successes, and you get to the third phase, and everybody says, I was behind it from day one. So that's, we're today kind of between phase 1 and 2. So, so go to the next page. So there's 3 aircraft versions, 3 variants in the F-35 program. There's the CTOL, conventional takeoff and landing aircraft, which is largely an Air Force type aircraft. The middle aircraft there shown is the STOVL, the standard takeoff and vertical landing. Like the Harrier, you've seen the Harrier. It's got the vertical lift capability. So very new, US hasn't had one of those, and it's like the Harrier, if you've seen the Harrier before. So that would be Marine close air support type aircraft. And the third one is the carrier variant. So in one aircraft, although 3 variants, you meet the needs of all the services. So that's like no other aircraft before. The other thing that's unique about this is the international participation, the international programs or countries that have signed on. So there are 8 countries that signed on initially. Those are our international partners, and they are Britain, Italy, Norway, Denmark, Turkey, Holland, and Australia. And so they signed early on. They had some money contributed for development, and in return it's not an offset program. It's called industrial participation. So they have the right to have work in their country, but they have to be competitive and they have to meet quality standards and all those kind of things. So they get the right to compete. And we do have work in all those countries, and I'll talk a little bit about what work we have there. But that brings in a lot of complexities, because when it comes to authorizations and yearly authorizations and quantities and things like that we're going to be buying, just like we go through the U.S. government authorization process through Congress and into DOD and the acquisition, then you also must go through that from the foreign countries, and they must authorize their quantities. So quite complex. We'll go to the next page. So another set of unique aspects about the program is because it is a 5th generation aircraft, it's obviously applying all the latest technologies, and in that also is the global sustainment piece of that. If you've seen cost models of aircraft programs, the real cost is not just in the initial acquisition of the aircraft, but it's in the sustaining and the maintenance of that aircraft. And so there are new technologies, new things being applied in the sustainment and support area to make sure that this aircraft is sustainable. An example of that is common training facilities, common training, so the training can be set up not one time, but and have great consistency across all the different variants. So that's where you leverage the 3 different variants through its training, through its support, through all of those kind of things. And then the international aspect with the domestic partners, product coming from all over the world makes it very complex just from the logistics of this program as well. We go to the next one. A little bit about the partners. So Lockheed Martin is the prime contractor, and there's three key partners here. Northrop Grumman, and I'll talk a little bit about our work share. As the picture is circled there, we have basically the section from behind the cockpit back to the front of the wings. From the center fuselage, we have other work content as well across the aircraft. I'll talk about that. Lockheed does the front end, the cockpit end, and the wings. Excuse me. And BAE does the aft end of the aircraft, the hot section. And then Pratt & Whitney is the engine provider. A little bit about where we are. Let's go to the next page for a second. Okay, before we go into that, I'll just talk a little bit about where we are in the program. Overall, there's about 2,500 aircraft that will be built. You've heard in the news some reduction of budgets and quantities and shifting to the right. So because of this issue of concurrency, where we have ongoing development, we still have developmental things that need to be resolved yet. Overlaying that with production creates complexities. So there's been a reduction in the quantities to shift the quantities to the right and allow more of the development to be completed, so that you won't have as much retrofit and repairs and retrofit and all for those what we call SDD, the development fixes. So while things have moved to the right a little bit, they have not gone down. So there's strong support for the aircraft. The volume's there. As I said, it is the largest defense program, but it's also the largest in the future too, with huge quantities going out in the future. So it's a long, stable business to come. The U.S. is buying in the neighborhood of, excuse me, about 2,000 aircraft, and then FMS is 800. FMS foreign military sales from across our partners. So we can see quantities of 2,500 to 3,000 being planned over the next 20 and plus years. In addition to the industrial partners, other countries that have signed on lately, Israel has signed on, and in fact we have ongoing discussions with them right now for quantities and all. And then also F-35 was down selected by Japan in December, and they're signing on as well. There's discussions going on between January and June on getting that contract laid in between Lockheed and the U.S. government. So we'll see that. We'll see that in the future. We'll see more countries coming on board and selecting the F-35. So we think there's more foreign sales there as well. To date, there's been about in the low 20s aircraft delivered, both for test bed purposes, doing flight tests. We're about 20% through its developmental testing. And right now we have roughly 40 aircraft in Lockheed at different stages of assembly, major assembly. And this year, Northrop Grumman will load its 100th center fuselage. So back earlier in the build cycle, before you get to the integration and flight test and testing by the services and all, you have our systems, the wing, the center fuselage, the aft sections being built up, and we're at unit 100 this year. So you can see the program is well on its way with capability being, or with vehicles being put out there for test and all. And we passed a major milestone in the last few months. There were, I think it was 6 aircraft that were put out for training. So we've gone now a little bit beyond just the development and test portion. We're actually putting some aircraft into the testing there. Foreign countries that are buying aircraft will test the aircraft and fly the aircraft through in the U.S. through training facilities and through the training in the U.S. All training is done in the U.S. now. All flights of those aircraft will be done through 2014 in the U.S. I think, and the testing is done. We do most of the testing at PAX back on the East Coast, and Edwards is where the testing is done today. The training is done in Eglin down in Florida. And from I mentioned the rate point of view. From a rate point of view, the plan is to get to 1 a day. So you can see that's quite a fast rate, and our tooling and all is being planned to be able to build and deliver at one a day. We moved from last year. We were at about a PI, a production interval of about 10, and we're moving now to about 5. So we'll deliver 40 aircraft this year. All right, and so Northrop Grumman, back to what we do. Northrop Grumman, we have 3 different sectors involved. We have electronic systems sector, does radar work and electronic warfare or electronics work. Aerospace systems, I'll talk more. That's the sector that I'm in. We'll talk more about what we do there. And then information systems does CNI, communications, navigation, and identification system. And you'll see at the end I have a short video about our IAL, our integrated automated line. Some pretty high-tech tools and all being applied in our assembly line up in Palmdale so we can get to that 1 a day. You go to the next page. So Northrop Grumman's work, we do the center fuselage. I have some pictures. We'll talk about that. In fact, we'll talk about each of these individually. But beyond just the center fuselage, we're also involved in the mission systems, responsible for some of the avionics components and mission software. We're also responsible for some of the vehicle systems, the weapon bay doors and fire protection system, the autonomic logistics, We have the LO support. LO is the low observable. We're the team lead on that. As far as low observability, Northrop Grumman has extensive experience in that in different aircraft, so we're the lead for that technology on the aircraft. And then systems engineering and flight test support. Go to the next page. So for the center fuselage, for all three variants, we have the center bay. We do the duct work. The duct work is the inlet ducts, the air intake, leading to the engine and the air feed for the engine. We do skins and panels for different mechanisms in the aircraft as well. This is mostly composite on the skin structure, and then a lot of lower assemblies with more of the structural pieces down below. So that's our center fuselage work, and that you'll see a little bit more of that in the video you'll see at the end, and that's the work that's done and built up in Palmdale. Next page. Yeah, on our mission systems, just a little bit about where in the aircraft the CNI goes. We're responsible for quite a bit of the onboard software. This aircraft is very software intense. I've heard numbers of like 20 million lines of code. We have a couple challenging areas left in development yet. The arresting hook for the carrier version, you probably read about that. Some difficulties with that. Getting that to catch a cable, pretty important for an aircraft on a what they call a blue water operation. So that's in work and development. Made some good headway lately on that. We're confident we'll have that problem behind us. That is a Northrop Grumman. We're responsible for that portion of the work. Another one is the helmet and the heads-up display technology. And Lockheed is leading that. Some very new technology in that whole area. Presents some complications. And the last one is the software that I mentioned, getting software to be integrated. So Lockheed's got a major focus on all those areas, as do we, the contractors, and the number one priority is getting those problems nailed down and getting them behind us. Next page. So part of the autonomic logistics, the low observables, the LO, the coding and all of that, the life, design life for that, the maintainability of that, the repair and all of that, it falls in our job jar, our responsibility for that. And then also spares and provisioning. We're also the leader for all of the courseware, all the training and courseware for all variants and all. That's our responsibility as well. So you can see our responsibility goes beyond just the center fuselage. It's spread throughout. And that is one of the, I'll say one of the little bit of complications on all of this is that due to the partnership aspect of it and the international partnership, international aspects of it as well, there are parts going everywhere. There are parts that we buy and are responsible for the buy, but we don't install. We would deliver directly to Lockheed. There are parts that Lockheed buys and doesn't install and delivers to us, and same for BAE. So there is work that is going in every direction. So being responsible for global supply chain, I also have all of logistics and support and all of the stores and all those kinds of things. So there's quite a bit of work associated and planning that goes into that, how we can optimize all of that, and feed a line that's going to run at one a day. So a lot of challenges here. Next page. A little bit about the planned quantities. I kind of mentioned this before. The CTOL aircraft is the one that by volume, there will be the most aircraft out there. Those are the ones that are out there in training, in flight now. Is the first one off the line. First one's being built out there. Next follows Stovall and then CV. The quantity is a little bit less than that based upon the needs and all. And then the planned production, if for international, at 800 there. And then additional opportunities that I mentioned that could include, will include Israel and Japan and then others as well. Next page. So some of our different partners, I mentioned the tooling and the automated tooling we have in our factory, very unique. We work with KUKA on that. KUKA is very experienced in the automotive industry, and so we looked around for some of the most capable companies in that industry and brought them into the aerospace world, very, very new in doing that. They've done a great job, and they support us up there. They have people full-time up there in Palmdale with us. Kidda does a fire protection system. Harris does the electronics racks for us. And let's see, Goodrich does the weapons bay door, a lot of the drive mechanisms for us. And Honeywell does a nav, the nav system. And ATK does a lot of our composite and work for us. Next page. So it's kind of an interesting chart, show how the aircraft comes together, and just maybe a little bit shows the complexity of the different parts from the different suppliers and where they go. So a lot of the international partners have a lot of the composite pieces on the aircraft. So you can see the weapons bay door, for example, is being built by TAI. TAI is probably the largest of our partners here from my perspective, from a supply chain work content point of view. TAI is in Turkey as one of the partners. They will end up building a whole center fuselage. So everything we build in Palmdale, a whole center fuselage there, they will end up building there. And we've had a maturity path where in the first year they built a subsection of it, and the next year we gave them kits and they built it up. So they've gradually been building it up. We have a team of about 11 people that are over there supporting them full time. Our engineering teams are very closely in touch and coordinated. Any issues we see on our factory line, we make sure we communicate to them. So, you know, this is in today's world, it's similar to the 787 in some ways. It's a worldwide supply chain that requires extremely close communication, both in the supply chain world, but in engineering and manufacturing as well. And it brings a lot of complications to the global supply chain team as well. And I think from a supplier community, you can see how important it is that and how much we depend upon parts being on time and on quality, because things are so complex, we can't handle the aberrations. Next. So just from a little bit from the part count, we have Wesco does line support. We have 6,300 bins for our standard parts on the floor. Wesco's done a great job for us at Northrop Grumman. They've been a partner of ours. We have them on the F-18 line, and they won the competition and are now in place on the F-35 line. And so that getting the parts on the floor, transferring more responsibility to the suppliers for that, we're moving in that direction and have done that. So we do that with our consumables on the line as well. That's all managed by a third party. The paints, oils, lubricants, all of that managing of that on the line done by a third party for us, along with Wesco. You know, the other thing about this, that when I went over there, I thought, okay, this is one program, it's the F-35. It's probably complex, but we'll get through it. And I'm thinking it's an 80-20 rule that someone had mentioned earlier, right? I'm sure the parts across the three variants, 80% common, 20% different. But when I got over there, I said, yeah, I found it was 80-20, all right? 20% common, 80% different. So it's just another complexity from us in the supply chain in buying and making sure we got the right parts at the right times out on the floor. Next page. Just a pictorial, this one just a pictorial to kind of talk about what I mentioned a minute ago, to get more supplier to be able to get parts at the point of use of delivery. Our approach from our manufacturing line is to make sure that we keep the mechanics on the aircraft. We don't want them off that aircraft. They need to be there working. And the more efficient we can make them, the better we can come down our learning curve. And you know, that is so key for us. One of the criticisms is the cost of this aircraft. And it's hurt us that the quantities haven't gone up. We haven't had the benefit of cost reductions by a higher quantity. We've had to work for our cost reductions harder. But nevertheless, the expectation is there that we're coming down the learning curve. And to be able to come down the learning curve, you've got to be looking for efficiencies every day and improvements every day. And so one of the things that we do in global supply chain, working very close with production, is to make sure if there's anything that we can do to get them the part on the line in an easier fashion, somehow we do it. So we have more line side stocking of parts. We don't bag parts. We have them loose at the station, and yet you have to control them as well. So all those kinds of things to drive efficiency on the production line. It's all about driving the hours per aircraft down. Next page. So I'm going to switch gears for just a second here now. I'm going to talk a little bit about quality and quality at Northrop Grumman. So this is not just F-35, but this is how we look at quality across the page. And we say that the chart just is to depict that we have quality right at the very beginning. It's quality in choosing our suppliers that we have on our ASL. It's quality in understanding our requirements right from the get-go, that we have requirements that we can flow down and we can execute to. And then down further, as we release the orders to the supplier, make sure our requirements are clear and we have proper flow down of requirements. And then we have, sometimes we have source selection or source inspection at suppliers. Sometimes we don't. We have self-inspection. And then during delivery inspection, of course, and then on the line inspection as well. So just quality throughout our process, throughout the supply chain process. Next page. And again, the full circle, right? So we make sure we've got the right suppliers, we flow down the right requirements, they understand the requirements, the product is delivered with the quality built into the product, and then post-delivery review, we don't have problems with the part once it gets to our line, and all of that goes back into our supplier selection. So suppliers that fall out at this and have poor quality metrics, don't make it back up to the top box there, and won't be in the supply base, in the future. And the next chart, I think we'll talk about that a little bit more. So in this one, for those of you, I'm sure you all know our process with suppliers. We have a scorecard, we have a rating system. I heard the comment earlier, and I know you don't always agree with the scores. And first of all, I think they're a great communication vehicle. And ours are, in the procurement world, very metric driven. So we measure on-time delivery, and we measure quality. And what this depicts is that suppliers that deliver 100% on time, 100% quality for 4 quarters running can move their way up to a platinum preferred supplier. And 7% of our suppliers make that tough threshold, admittedly very tough. Below that, missing one of those marks in the 12-month period, we still have 16% that are platinum, and below that, on a step on the way there, we have 7% that are supplier self-inspection. That's 30% of our suppliers are in that top area where we have less inspections required by ourselves. We think that costs us less, and the suppliers have earned that right because they're delivering quality on time with 100% quality. And if you look at the right, what's indicated there is 67% of our work goes to those suppliers. So 67% of our work goes to 30% of our suppliers, and we're driving that higher. So that's our intent, is to drive work towards the top of this pyramid. And you talked about earlier about the tough defense budget that we've got, the tightening budgets, both in the commercial world and in the defense world. That's for us too. So we have less time to babysit suppliers that can't make good parts, to pull parts off of aircraft and do all the rework that's required on that. You can't imagine the amount of hours and the disruption it causes when we have to take parts off of aircrafts. It's very, very painful. So we just can't tolerate it. And we don't have the resources as much anymore to be able to do that. So as we tighten our belts and cut, we don't have the time to spend with the suppliers that don't meet our standards. So it's forcing us to drive it more and more to the top. That's where we're coming from. And then next page. And then metrics. This is just a chart to show that every week I look at the supplier metrics, and I look at who our red suppliers are. Every week I look at the quality metrics, and my team reports to me who are the suppliers that aren't meeting their requirements, and how many disclosures have we had this week, and what's our problem. I look at it, I report it up to my management, and we report it to Lockheed. So it gets a lot of visibility. Next page. Shift gear here for a second and now talk about a second thing that's very important to us from a customer view is affordability. So I think this is old news. Ashton Carter's not in that role anymore, but I know you've all heard about this mandate for affordability. In fact, there's a requirement, a government requirement coming down in contracts now that contractors have an affordability plan. So it's a procedural deliverable. We need to have an affordability plan. We need to be driving costs down. It's part of the DoD vernacular and part of the requirement sets that come down in major contracts. So it's gone beyond something that's exceptional and unique. It is standard fare and expected in the contractor community. Next page. There we go. So we have a process within Northrop Grumman. I have an affordability lead who he and his team work specifically on affordability to drive costs out. In F-35, we're in the LRIP 5-6 time frame right now, LRIP, the low rate initial production run, it's the annual authorization of how many vehicles we'll buy each year. So in LRIP 5, we'll start, we're delivering LRIP 4 now, starting on LRIP 5. We're buying for LRIP 6, about to buy for LRIP 7, but it's expected. Every LRIP is less than the year before. So despite inflation, escalation, whatever those challenges bring, the government's expectation is that the jet will cost less and less each year. So we have to do that through efficiencies. And we need our supply base to make sure that they're implementing a lot of the things that we talked about in here to be able to drive costs down and be able to help us meet these affordability initiatives. So that's expected for the suppliers in the F-35 program. We communicate to them. That's the expectation. When we come to you for the negotiations for the next year or when we do a multi-year deal, expect it. It's standard fare. The price has to be coming down, year after year. And we seek input. What are your inputs to us? Are we driving you with requirements, things that you think are non-value added? Tell us, and we'll work to get those requirements out. It's a two-way, definitely a two-way street. Next page. So, lastly, in wrap-up, I would like to say that Northrop Grumman, I think, is positioned well in the defense program's outlook. If you look at the programs that have been hit most, Northrop Grumman is not in those. We're certainly not in a growth mode. It's more of a stable mode. We're looking to be more flat. But of the defense contractors, Northrop Grumman is lined up on the right kind of programs. Secondly, it's back to the point of affordability. With reduced spending, with the pressures that we have on budgets, affordability is really the byword. And the more you can implement that in your companies and you're ahead of your competitors, allows you to be, I think, be able to grow and increase your in your base, as much as Michael had said. And then again, excellence in the supplier performance. A lot of the things you talked about in here, I really endorse. I think SEA is a great organization, provides you with some great tools, and what the things are that you talked about, Michael, are exactly what we need from a customer point of view. As we said, we are moving to zero tolerance for quality escapes for the reasons we have told you, and zero tolerance for schedule slips. The program is just run on that kind of a basis, that those are the things that we need as a customer. The other one I would put is also increased agility, and I know sometimes that's in conflict with those two things above it, but we do need agility as well. And by agility, one of the examples that I would mean is shorter lead times. We get jets added to us and jets taken away sometimes, but that ability to be agile in the supply base is important as well. And I know it drives us all nuts. Stability helps drive costs down, but there is a degree of agility that is needed in these programs. And finally, then, just from the F-35 message, the growth tomorrow is dependent upon the performance today. We're out there to make this program 100% success today, and by doing that, we'll assure ourselves of growth tomorrow. So, great. Thank you. I don't know if we have time for questions, Michael, or a couple minutes. Okay? Any questions?
Because these airplanes are manufactured and assembled all over the place, we can't even ship a doorknob, outside of the United States, let alone. So how do you deal with this whole ITAR issue and all these warplane parts everywhere around the world?
Yeah, it is complex, but it's a major focus of the program. We have an ITAR department, and we make sure that we go through the approvals that are necessary. We make sure we plan it in advance. Going through and getting the right export authorizations, import authorizations. It can be done, it just takes time. So we've had a team that's focused on it and done it. They're not built all over the world from an assembled up point of view. The final integration, the major integration, is done in Fort Worth with Lockheed there. The section for BAE, the aft section, yes, assembled there and delivered over here. So the export isn't there yet, right? There will be when it comes to spares and repairs and things like that in years to come, but right now that's not there. So it's mostly the import piece. But we do export some because TAI in Turkey is doing the whole center fuselage, so we do have some exporting there. But it's been well planned, been orchestrated. The government and Lockheed have been helpful through that whole process. It's an additional challenge. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you very much. Oh.
Give me a few more minutes and I'll.
Okay.
From your presentation, Michael, it looks like maybe the F-35 has about 2,500 suppliers. Does that sound right?
No, that sounds heavy.
That's wrong?
Yeah, 400-ish. We have done,
okay.
you know, Northrop Grumman has done, I would say, a good job reducing the supply base overall. I think we've cut our supply base in half in the last, I'll say, 5 years. So surprisingly, we don't have thousands of suppliers. We have under 500 suppliers on the F-35 program.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yeah.
I picked up something off a graph, but I was obviously looking at the wrong thing. And then so from that number, 400, about 30% are somewhere in the platinum range, as I understood that part of it, which would be
Yeah.
about 120.
Yeah, the pyramid in the percentages was a company-wide, NGAS company-wide. But if you would assume for a second that the suppliers on Northrop Grumman are representative of the whole, then your premise is right.
So approximately
Yeah.
120 of those are in platinum,
Yes.
which is pretty much 100% on time and 0%
It is.
quality.
It's a pretty unforgiving metric.
Yeah. And then I saw a reference to reds and yellows, which I think was tagged to certain suppliers. Was that accurate? That
Yes, we have a scorecard method, and we color code our suppliers, and they can become red or yellow depending upon their delivery. We have two different measures. We have procurement measure through our SAMS process, or through our process that's a scorecard process. It's on OASIS, a supplier portal, so suppliers see that and can see that there. And then in subcontracts world, we have a SAMS evaluation that has a little bit different criteria, but both of them are focused on delivery, quality, customer satisfaction levels, responsiveness, those kinds of things, yes.
So reds and yellows are suppliers with specific issues, or are they just suppliers that fall below the platinum level?
Could be both. It could be both or either, actually.
Okay.
So I would say in the procurement world, keep it this in the procurement world, it's largely those that have failed to meet quality or delivery.
And do we know approximately how much of that 400 is reds and yellows?
No, it's not the majority, though. I mean, it's not 30%. It's I'd say it's thinking of numbers here, close to 10-ish%, maybe lower. That's yellows and reds, and few reds. Not that many reds.
Okay. So
And I would say for the red suppliers, we will engage, we will work with them, and try to see the problems recover. I can think of a couple companies specifically. We've put people in their factory for 6, 7, 8 months, working with them on the issues, and the issues many times come down to execution issues: failure to train, failure to write good shop travelers, failure to oversee that they're following their travelers. Some basic things is usually the issue. And we will put someone in the facility to help them come along. But at some point in time, the company has to take it up themselves and take ownership of that issue and fix those problems. And so we won't be there. We don't want to be there long. That's not our job to do. And so a supplier that is red, we will help them for a period, but they must recover in some period. And if they don't, then we would exit.
So hopefully a lot of people in the audience are translating this discussion about reds recovering to those suppliers that have a process and can maintain that process and mature that process to fix a problem are going to be the ones that you can walk away from and know that they're going to stick.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
And I think a lot of the things you've talked about in here are exactly the remedies and the things that keep you from being a red and yellow supplier. You talked about eliminating the variation here. I saw on one of the charts. You eliminate the variation and you have a stable process. You can predict the output. You're going to get a good output. And you do that, you won't have these kinds of issues.
Now, finally, and if there's anybody else that has a question, I'll give up the floor, but if not, then I think we have a few more minutes from our point of view. You mentioned affordability and agility. And of course, sometimes we have to translate things like affordability into what a small supplier thinks about. From your standpoint, we understand that's having a cost curve that goes down every time you turn the crank. But from the standpoint of the supply chain, what do you see as the biggest issue around affordability?
The biggest, if you mean issue, you mean impediment. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
A lot of our parts are more the mechanical, structural parts. So if I think of suppliers in that realm, material costs is a big portion of the bill. And if a supplier can't influence the material costs, that means a significant percentage of their cost, they have a harder time driving down.
Right.
So we recognize that. That's a real issue. We've done some things to help fix that. They're on, certainly on F-18 program, we had certain company-wide long-term agreements for titanium, for aluminum, for plate, or for ingot and whatnot. And so we would strike a deal, and then suppliers would be able to buy off that. So consortium buys, things like that. Same thing with on F-35. We have that for fasteners, for many of our Alcoa fasteners. So we try to enable suppliers. So we try to establish consortium buys at optimum pricing,
right,
and then enable the supplier to be able to buy at that. So I recognize that as one of the impediments.
Right. Well, that's consortium buys is really, from what I've seen, probably one of the only high-impact solutions to that problem.
It is.
Because these little guys don't have leverage on material costs and certainly don't have leverage on financing.
Right,
So.
right. Well, it's one of the areas where, it only makes sense to look at it across F-35, everybody using it, whether it's BAE, whether it's Lockheed, whether it's us, and all the suppliers. You combine all of that, there's real volume out there. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question.
Oh.
I'm not going to let you just have a conversation, butt in. Just curious, when you started working with Wesco as let's call them a middleman to kind of collect and kit and deal with suppliers, we see that happening with a lot of our customers that are first tier or second tier, where we're going in and now we're suddenly dealing with a third party. What do you think were some of the bugs that you had to work out with doing that, having that middleman and then losing touch with the people who are actually building the parts for you?
Well, let's see. So most of all, it's confined to standard hardware. So it doesn't go much beyond that. So just to clarify what it is that we work with, right? Thousands of different part numbers, thousands of different parts, but it's confined to standard parts. So the issue for us really was the method by which our systems connect and they see our demand and the method in which they're implemented in our factory and able to see our demand fluctuation and be able to manage to that. So for us, we see it more with the Wesco than we did directly with the supplier beyond that itself. So I will say on F-35, it's newer over here, and we do have challenges with Alcoa fasteners as a result of that. So that isn't a more specific example where it goes down beyond Wesco, down into Alcoa. But for that, we, along with Lockheed, again, consortium buy with the Wesco, so, or with Alcoa, I'm sorry. So Wesco is just the interface, but the deal we're striking is with Alcoa for both us and our suppliers. So, that it? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
F-35 Lightning II is the only international fifth-generation strike fighter in the world. Northrop Grumman Corporation has a significant stake in this vital security program. The aerospace systems sector provides a major airframe segment, as well as software and sustainment products and services.
The F-35 integrated assembly line is the most advanced of its kind in aerospace manufacturing. The IAL maximizes robotics and automation, providing additional capacity and assembly capability while meeting engineering tolerances that are not easily achieved using manual methods. The technologies deployed on the IAL have created more efficient and ergonomic processes for assembly of the Joint Strike Fighter. With the IAL fully operational, the F-35 assembly team will increase affordability and first-time quality.